Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. In the summer of 2025, a trade dispute erupted between the United States and Canada over a single critical metal, nickel. President Trump's administration imposed tariffs of up to 30% on imported nickel, aiming to protect American industry and encourage domestic production. But the U.S. has only one nickel mine, and all its output is sent to Canada for refining, making America heavily dependent on its northern neighbor. The move sent shockwaves through both economies, threatening a $3.9 billion trade relationship and decades of seamless mineral flow. Automakers and battery manufacturers in the U.S. suddenly faced a supply chain crisis. The tariffs were meant to boost national security, but critics argued they targeted a reliable ally and risked destabilizing the North American auto industry. Canada, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, saw its resource-rich economy under threat. The dispute quickly escalated beyond nickel, putting the future of the green energy transition and the U.S.-Canada alliance at stake. The nickel tariffs of 2025 became the opening shot in a trade war with far-reaching consequences. What began as a policy move to protect American interests would soon reshape the entire North American industrial landscape. The stage was set for a high-stakes confrontation between two of the world's closest allies. The world was about to learn just how critical and contentious a single metal could become. The trade war had begun. The impact of the nickel tariffs hit American consumers almost immediately. Electric vehicle prices, once on a downward trend, began to climb as battery costs soared. Automakers, unable to absorb the extra costs, passed them on to buyers. A typical electric SUV saw its battery pack cost jump by $250, pushing sticker prices up by thousands. The Ford F-150 Lightning, for example, leapt from $67,500 to $72,500 overnight. The result? EV sales projections plummeted, with nearly 94,000 fewer units expected to sell in 2026. Families hoping to buy their first electric car were suddenly priced out. The tariffs, intended to help American industry, made EVs less competitive and slowed the shift to cleaner transportation. The trade war was no longer just a policy debate. It was hitting the wallets of ordinary Americans. The dream of affordable electric cars was slipping away. Detroit's automakers were caught in the crossfire. General Motors and Ford, already operating on thin margins, saw profits erode as battery costs soared. GM's projected EV profit margin for 2026 dropped from 10% to 8.5%, translating to hundreds of millions in lost profit. GM slashed its EV production outlook by 15,000 units, a $3.2 billion blow. The industry faced a dilemma: support the administration's goals or protect their own survival. With no significant U.S. nickel production, automakers considered riskier, higher carbon sources from Russia or Indonesia. The defense sector, reliant on nickel for military hardware, raised alarms about new vulnerabilities. The tariffs, meant to enhance security, instead exposed the U.S. to greater risks and undermined its own industries. Detroit's pain was a warning. The trade war's unintended consequences were spreading fast. The policy backfired, threatening both economic and national security. The auto industry was in crisis. Canada didn't just retaliate, it reinvented its strategy. Ottawa imposed a 15% export tax on raw nickel to the U.S., raising costs for American processors. But the real shift was branding Canadian nickel as green, mined with hydroelectric power and a low carbon footprint. Canada launched a carbon tracking system certifying its nickel as the world's most sustainable. This created a two-tiered market: premium green nickel for eco-conscious buyers, and dirtier nickel for everyone else. U.S. buyers now had to compete for clean supply or look elsewhere. Canada also rolled out a $5 billion Buy Canadian program, demanding more domestic processing and investment. The goal: move up the value chain, producing battery components at home, not just exporting raw materials. Canada was no longer just a supplier, it was positioning itself as the global leader in responsible critical minerals. The counterpunch was complete. Canada's response wasn't just about tariffs. It was about building a more resilient, sustainable economy. The trade war forced Canada to innovate. The country was now less dependent on the U.S. and more competitive than ever. A new era for Canadian industry had begun. As the U.S. market closed, Canada opened new doors in Europe and Asia. European and Asian nations, hungry for green nickel, saw Canada as the perfect partner. The EU's new carbon border tax made Canadian nickel, mined with hydropower, especially attractive. Germany quickly signed supply deals, willing to pay a premium to meet climate targets and avoid carbon penalties. South Korea's battery giants boosted imports from Canada by 20%, seeking to reduce reliance on higher carbon sources. Canada redirected at least $1.8 billion in trade away from the US by 2027. The US tariffs, meant to isolate American industry, instead isolated it from the world's cleanest nickel. Canadian producers found eager new buyers, strengthening their global position. The tariffs backfired. Canada's nickel industry wasn't crippled, it was liberated. The world's demand for green minerals had found a new champion. Canada's pivot was a resounding success. The global market had shifted. Carbon became Canada's secret weapon. Canadian nickel, produced with hydroelectric power, had a carbon footprint of just 4.2 tons of CO2 per ton, far lower than China or Indonesia. New EU regulations like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism put a price on pollution. Using Indonesian nickel could add hundreds of euros in carbon taxes per car. For automakers, switching to Canadian nickel wasn't just about image, it was a financial necessity. Canada's carbon tracking system certified its exports, giving buyers proof of sustainability. The US tariffs inadvertently spotlighted Canada's greatest strength. While America turned inward, Canada aligned with the future sustainable, profitable trade. Green nickel became king and Canada set the global standard. The world's shift to low-carbon supply chains was now unstoppable. Canada's environmental edge became its economic advantage. The trade war had changed the rules. The trade war was a wake-up call for Canada. Ottawa launched a push for self-reliance, investing $257 million to boost domestic battery production. The goal moved from raw mineral exporter to manufacturer of batteries and EV components. Tax incentives attracted global giants. Stellantis and LG built a massive gigafactory in Windsor, Ontario. Thousands of new jobs and a homegrown battery supply chain followed. The old model, Canada digs, the US builds, was over. Now Canada was adding value at home, keeping more wealth within its borders. The tariffs forced a fundamental shift in strategy. Canada was no longer just a resource economy, it was becoming an industrial powerhouse. The future was about technology, not just minerals. The country was ready for a new era. As the trade war's costs mounted, both sides felt the pressure to negotiate. US automakers and defense contractors lobbied for relief, while Canada's pivot to new markets couldn't fully replace its biggest trading partner. Talks began in autumn 2025, but trust was low. President Trump offered a pathway for tariff exemptions, but Canada wasn't automatically included. The US wanted concessions. Canada responded by pausing its EV sales mandate and launching a $5 billion fund to shield its industries. Negotiations became a delicate dance, with both sides wary of appearing weak. Analysts put the odds of a deal at 60%, with options ranging from full exemption to a lower blended tariff. The stakes were enormous. 85% of US-Canada trade was already tariff-free under USMCA. The nickel dispute threatened to unravel decades of integration. The outcome would shape the future of North American industry. The world watched as two allies struggled to find common ground. The clock was ticking. The nickel trade war redrew the map for North America's electric vehicle industry. US tariffs backfired, hurting consumers and automakers while failing to spark a domestic nickel boom. Canada emerged stronger, diversifying its economy, branding its green nickel, and building a domestic battery industry. European and Asian companies gained a competitive edge with stable, low-carbon supply. Even the environment benefited as the world shifted toward rewarding clean production. The US-Canada relationship was changed forever. Trust in the old supply chain was shaken. Even if a deal is reached, the landscape is different. Canada will never be as reliant on the US again. The trade war proved that tariffs can have unpredictable, self-defeating consequences. In a connected world, alliances and industries can be reshaped overnight. The lesson: in the race for the future, sustainability and cooperation matter more than ever. The Nickel War's legacy will echo for years to come. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.